The man behind the silent Seethy didn't expect him to show up. Not like that. Not without cameras, not without security, and not with that look in his eyes soft, like he was already listening. The studio crew stood frozen as Keanu Reeves stepped through the service entrance, wearing an old hoodie, jeans that didn't quite fit, and shoes that had clearly walked too far. The room had gone quiet. Not out of awe, but out of confusion. The assistant director whispered, "Is that really him?" The lighting guy dropped his sandwich. No one dared speak louder. Keanu nodded politely, walked past everyone, and made his way to the back corner of the lot. There, leaning against a metal rig, was a young woman with trembling hands. Her name was Jules. She was a new intern. No one knew much about her except that she never spoke unless asked, and even then her voice barely carried. Since day one, always just one breath away from quitting, Keanu didn't say anything, not at first. He simply sat next to her on the cold floor, offering her the thermos he had in his hand. She looked at him confused, maybe even a little scared. "It's just tea," he said gently. "I used to drink this when I got nervous before auditions. Maybe it'll help." Her hands didn't reach for it. They stayed clenched in her lap. Keanu didn't push, just sat there, silent, sipping from the thermos as if the whole world wasn't watching them from behind cables and monitors. The silence stretched finally. Jules whispered, "Why are you here?" He looked at her, eyes kind, but tired. "'Cause someone needed me to be." And just like that, everything changed. 2 weeks earlier, the producer of the film had received a call. Not from Keanu's agent, not from some publicist, but from Keanu himself. "I heard you've got a set full of stressed-out kids," he said over the phone. "Mind if I stop by sometime?" The producer laughed, thinking it was a joke. But Keanu wasn't joking. He'd heard that a group of young interns were being overworked and undervalued on one of the company's new experimental shoots. Nothing illegal. Nothing scandalous. Just something that didn't sit right. Most actors wouldn't care. Keanu did. The studio didn't know what to do. They couldn't stop him. They didn't want to. And when he showed up, no one could look away. Back on set, the director finally approached. "Keanu, are you ... here for a role?" Or Keanu stood slowly, helped Jules to her feet, and smiled. "No role. Just wanted to remind everyone what this place is really about." The director nodded awkwardly, not sure what that meant. But Jules understood. She'd been holding in tears since morning. Not because of the job, but because of what she left behind to chase a dream. Her mother was sick. Her father had stopped calling. And the only thing keeping her upright was a single message she once read in a magazine canoe saying, "Us. Sometimes the people with the saddest eyes are the ones trying hardest to make others smile." That sentence had pulled her out of a dark place once. Now, the man himself stood beside her. "You're doing better than you think," he said, his voice calm like rain. "Don't let the noise around you drown out the truth." Keanu came back the next day, and the day after. Not as a star. Not as a guest, but as someone who walked in quietly, shared lunch with the crew, and made sure no one sat alone. He noticed things others missed. He noticed when Cameron, the boom mic operator, was nursing a bruised shoulder, but too afraid to ask for help. He noticed when Emily, a costume assistant, skipped meals to afford bus fare. He noticed when Liam, the young editor, stayed late just to avoid going home. Keanu didn't fix their lives. He didn't throw money at the problems. Did something harder. He made them feel seen. One evening, the cast gathered for a final rehearsal. Tensions were high. The lead actor had a meltdown over a misplaced prop. Voices were raised, fingers pointed. People walked out. But Keanu stayed. He walked onto the stage. Not as a character, not as a hero, but as himself. He picked up the broken prop, looked around, and said, "It's okay to fall apart. What matters is what we do after." The room went still. No one expected wisdom in the middle of chaos. He looked at the lead actor and smiled. "You're not weak. You're just human. We all are." The actor nodded slowly. Apology followed. Tempers cooled, and just like that, the rehearsal continued. By the end of the month, the entire set had changed. Not because of new policies, not because of strict rules, but because of presence. It's because one man decided to lead not with power, but with empathy. People worked harder. They smiled more. They helped each other. They listened, not because they were told to, but because kindness had become the new language. One night, Jules found a note taped to her locker. It wasn't signed. It didn't need to be. It read, "You matter. It's not because of what you do, but because of who you are. This place is better with you in it." She cried quietly, holding the paper to her chest. She never found out if Keanu wrote it, but somehow she already knew. 1 month later, the film wrapped. The final day was filled with tears, hugs, and shared stories. Jules stood in the corner. Again, watching it all, Keanu approached. His hoodie still too big, his smile still small. "You ready to tell your story now?" he asked. She looked up at him, eyes no longer trembling. "I think so." He nodded. "Good. Because someone out there needs to hear it, just like you once needed to." Keanu left quietly. No press, no goodbye speech. Just a soft pat on the back and a gentle wave to the crew. He walked out the same way he came in, through the service entrance, unnoticed by the world, but the impact stayed behind. He didn't need applause. He never had. Because kindness doesn't beg to be seen. It just is, and those who feel it never forget. What no one saw coming was the 4th week after filming ended, when Jules received the message. No subject line, no signature. Just one sentence. "I hope you're still writing." She stared at her phone, stunned. She hadn't told anyone she was writing. It was something she did late at night, under the covers, just to get through the day. Short scenes. Unfinished poems. Moments she wished had gone differently. Her way of healing. But someone knew. Someone had noticed. And somehow, she felt it wasn't just anyone. 2 days later, she was invited to a small event in downtown Los Angeles. A quiet screening for an independent film made by first-time directors. Most people declined. Too tired. Too busy. Jules went. She walked into a dimly lit art theater where the chairs didn't match and the projector buzzed too loud. Only about 15 people were there. All of them young, nervous, raw. And then right before the screening began, he walked in. Keanu, he didn't sit in the front, didn't shake hands with producers. He sat in the back row next to an empty seat, next to Jules. "You made it," he said softly. "I didn't know you'd be here," she replied, voice trembling. "That's the point," he smiled. "This isn't about me." When the lights dimmed, the first short film played. It wasn't perfect. The audio was messy. The story jumped too fast, but it had heart. A real, aching heart. Keanu clapped harder than anyone else after each film. He made a point to find the person who made it. He didn't say, "Great job." He said things like, "The way you lit that scene made me feel like I was 6 years old again. That silence in the 3rd act, brave choice. You trusted the moment. I saw myself in that character. Thank you." The filmmakers didn't cry because he praised them. They cried because he understood them. After the screening, Keanu and Jules stepped outside into the cold night air. He handed her a folded piece of paper. "Someone's looking for a new assistant script editor. Low pay, long hours, but honest work. I told them about you." She blinked. "Why?" "Because you listen better than most people, right?" he said. "And because you don't need to be loud to be powerful." For a long moment, she couldn't speak. Then finally, her voice soft as ever, she asked, "Why do you help people like me?" Keanu looked at the sky. The city lights reflected in his eyes. "Because once someone helped me," he whispered, "and they didn't have to." That night, Jules went home and printed the email. She read it a dozen times, heart pounding. The job interview was in 3 days. She stayed up all night rewriting her samples, correcting punctuation, doubting every word, then believing in them again. 3 days later, she walked into the studio. It wasn't glamorous. A small editing bay, fluorescent lights, old coffee cups on the desks, but it was real. The woman who interviewed her asked, "Do you know Keanu personally?" Jules paused. "Not really," she said. "Then why did he recommend you?" She smiled. "Maybe because he saw something most people miss. The woman nodded slowly. That sounds like him. She got the job. Not because of Keanu's name, but because her work spoke louder than her fear, and every time she doubted herself. She remembered how Keanu looked at her not like a lost intern, but like a writer who just needed one reason to keep going. Meanwhile, Keanu kept showing up where no one expected. One week, he was spotted buying groceries for a struggling crew member. The next, he was volunteering at a night shelter in Pasadena. None of this made headlines, but it changed lives. Quietly, deeply. There was one moment that stood out. A young actor named Malik had landed a role in a new indie drama. He was talented, but insecure. Halfway through the shoot, he froze during a key scene. Forgot every line. Couldn't move, the director shouted. The crew sighed. But Keanu, who was just visiting the set that day, walked up to him, put a hand on his shoulder and said, "Do it again, but don't think about the lines. Think about the truth." Malik tried again. This time, he didn't just say the words, he lived them. Everyone felt it. Afterwards, Malik found Keanu by the snack table. "How did you know I could do it?" Keanu shrugged. "Because I've frozen before too. And someone reminded me I was more than my mistakes." Word began to spread, not through press or tabloids, but through whispers, messages, and late-night conversations. People didn't say Keanu helped me. They said Keanu reminded me, reminded them they mattered, reminded them they were more than titles or failures. Jules's world was growing. She had purpose now. Confidence came slowly, like spring thawing winter. But then, just when everything seemed to be falling into place, it all fell apart. Her mother's condition worsened. The calls became urgent. The messages from home were filled with fear. Jules couldn't afford to fly back. Her savings were gone. She'd just started this job. She didn't want to lose it. She sat outside the studio, sobbing into her coat. And then once again, he was there. Keanu didn't say anything. He simply handed her a plane ticket. First-class departure. Next morning, she looked at him through blurred eyes. "I can't accept this." He didn't argue, just said, "I'm not giving you a gift. I'm giving you time. Use it well." Jules flew home. She spent 5 days with her mother, held her hand, read to her, listened to her stories. Her mother smiled more in those 5 days than in the last 5 months. When Jules returned to Los Angeles, her job was still there, and waiting on her desk was a note. "Thank you for trusting yourself. And thank you for showing me that quiet strength still exists." Again, unsigned. Again, she didn't need proof. Months passed. Jules's name began appearing in the credits of small films, and bigger ones. Not famous yet. Not rich, but known. For her words. For her calm. For the truth she put on every page. When asked in an interview how she got her start, she said only one sentence. "Someone once saw past the noise." Keanu never changed. He still took the subway. Still gave up his seat. Still paused for every fan. But if you looked closer, you'd see it. He didn't just move through the world. He changed its temperature, like a quiet flame in a cold room. And the people who felt that warmth, they passed it on. The ripple we never see thee didn't know who placed the flowers. It was early morning at the edge of the city, in a quiet neighborhood where the streets were cracked and the buildings were tired. A small memorial sat beneath a flickering street lampan. Old photo frame, 2 candles, and a folded note weighted down by smooth stones. The flowers were fresh. Wildflowers, not store dash. Bought a teenager named Elias found them. He worked at the local grocery store and walked past the corner every day. The photo in the frame was of a man who used to sit on that sidewalk. Everyone just called him Tommy. No one knew if that was his real name. He rarely spoke. He always smiled. Tommy passed away 2 nights ago. No one came to claim him, no family, no record. Just a quiet end under a sky that didn't notice. But someone noticed. Elias picked up the note. Read, "He mattered, you mattered too." That same day, Elias saw him. Keanu, he was walking out of the store with a single bag of groceries. No entourage. No sunglasses. Just a hoodie pulled low and a quiet look on his face. Elias froze. He wanted to say something. Anything. But all that came out was, "Thank you for the flowers." Keanu paused, turned, then smiled. "He used to hum old songs," Keanu said gently. "Made the street feel softer." Elias nodded. "I didn't know anyone else noticed." Keanu nodded back. "The world is louder than it should be. We have to choose what we listen to." And he walked off, slowly. No rush. Just enough time to make someone feel real. News didn't cover that story. But Elias never forgot it. A few weeks later, he started a community project, putting benches on neglected corners. Places where people waited without rest. He painted signs above them that read, "You matter here." People asked him why he was doing it. He always said the same thing, "Because someone reminded me Tommy mattered." In another part of the city, Jules sat in a quiet cafe. She was writing again, not for work, not for deadlines, but for healing. She had started a blog called The Quiet Witness. No photos, no names, just stories of real people doing unseen things. The blog grew faster than she expected. Messages came in from strangers. "I didn't know anyone else felt like this. Your words made me get out of bed today. Finally told my father I forgive him." Jules never wrote about Keanu directly, but every post carried his fingerprint. His way of listening without interruption. His way of showing up without asking, his way of seeing past the surface. One post in particular changed everything. It was called "The Man on the Bench." She described a moment when she saw an older man crying on a park bench. No one stopped. People walked by, too busy, too afraid. But then someone sat next to him, didn't ask anything. Didn't offer advice, just sat, quietly, until the man stopped crying, then stood up, nodded, and walked away. Jules ended the post with one line. "That's what kindness is. It doesn't ask for credit, it just happens." The post went viral, and 2 days, thousands of readers shared their own stories. People who had been helped by strangers. People who had quietly helped others. The comment section turned into a living heartbeat, and deep. What? Inside, it buried under layers of usernames and replies, was a simple comment. "Maybe someday, you'll sit next to someone who needs you, and you'll stay." No name. But Jules knew. Meanwhile, Keanu was on another set. This time he wasn't acting. He was producing a short film made by a group of film students from a night school. The studio had rejected their pitch 3 times, but Keanu saw the script and said, "Let's make it." They didn't have money, so he gave up his producer's fee. They didn't have a location, so he offered his own garage. They didn't have equipment, so he called in favors from friends who owed him nothing, or respected him. Deeply, the film was shot in 6 days. Every night ended with shared meals, cheap pizza, and long conversations about art, fear, and second chances. One of the students, a shy woman named Tina, asked Keanu why he cared. He looked at her and said, "Because someone once let me try, when no one else would." The film went on to win a small award at a downtown festival. Not for the cinematography, not for the editing, but for its heart. Critics called it unpolished, raw, and necessary. One even wrote, "This film feels like someone holding your hand after a long night." The students were invited to speak. They asked Keanu to go with them. He declined. "This is your story," he said. "What? I was just part of the background." Back at Jules's apartment, she opened her inbox. One message stood out. "Subject to you. Don't know me, but I know you're writing." The message was from a mother in Ohio. Her teenage son had been struggling. Depression, silence, long nights, closed doors. But one day he showed her a blog post. The Man on the Bench. They read it together. They cried. They talked. And for the first time in 2 years, she said, "He let me hold his hand." Jules read the message over and over. Then finally, she wept. Not because she was sad, but because she finally understood. The reach of a quiet voice. Keanu never spoke about Jules publicly. Never posted her blog. Never claimed credit for what she was becoming. Because that's not what he wanted. He didn't want to be famous for kindness. He just wanted kindness too. Keep moving. One evening, a small envelope arrived at Jules's door. No return address. Inside was a Polaroid. His photo. A blurry image of a young boy on a bike, high-fiving an older man sitting on a bench. On the back, one line was written in pen. The bench is still there. She didn't need to ask who sent it. She just smiled, because she understood now. Kindness doesn't need noise. It needs memory. It needs continuation. And it needs people willing to sit beside strangers and stay a little longer than expected. One light at a time with rain didn't let up that evening. The streets were soaked, the wind loud enough to make people walk faster, heads down, eyes half shut. But inside a small bookstore tucked between two tall buildings, time moved slower. The place was nearly empty. Only one person sat near the back, a girl named Ruby, her hoodie pulled tight and a half-filled notebook open in front of her. She wasn't writing. She hadn't written anything in 3 months. Ruby used to believe words could save people. Now she wasn't sure. She stared at the same sentence for 20 minutes. Erased it. Rewrote it. Erased it again, then she heard the door open. She didn't look up. A man shook water off his coat, politely closed the door behind him, and walked through the quiet aisles without a word. She didn't recognize him at first, not until he walked past her table and smiled. Keanu, his hair was wet, his shoulders a little hunched from the cold. He held a paperback copy of a poetry book worn, pages yellow. Mind if I sit? He asked. She blinked, nodded slowly. He sat across from her, the book resting on the table between them. They sat in silence for a while. The only sound, the tapping of rain against glass. I read here sometimes, he said softly. When the world feels too loud. She looked down. I used to write here, now I just sit. Keanu glanced at her notebook? What stopped you? Her voice cracked. I think, ... I stopped believing it mattered. Keanu didn't respond right away. He opened the book he brought, flipped to a marked page, and slid it toward her. She read the line he pointed to. A candle doesn't ask if the room is too dark. It just lights. She looked at him. You think writing is like that? He nodded. I think people are like that. They spoke for hours. Not about fame or film or dreams. It's just about quiet things. Books that made them cry. Words they never got to say. Memories that still hurt but less when shared. When Ruby finally packed her bag, she felt something unfamiliar. Lightness. At the door, Keanu said, Write it. Even if no one sees it. Even if only you do. She walked into the rain, smiling for the first time in weeks. Keanu kept doing that, showing up where he wasn't expected, where there were no cameras. Not just bookstores. Once he sat in a hospital waiting room beside a man whose daughter was in surgery. He didn't speak the same language, but Keanu offered him coffee. They shared it in silence. Another time he was seen fixing a broken ramp outside a neighborhood theater. No one asked him to. He just saw someone in a wheelchair struggling, and the next day, he showed up with tools. He didn't post about it. He didn't even tell anyone, but the people who witnessed it. Those moments never left them. Jules heard one of these stories from her editor, who had received a handwritten letter from a small-town librarian. The letter said, A quiet man came to our library last Tuesday. He helped us lift bookshelves, asked nothing. Then donated 100 books to the kids section. Said he used to hide in libraries when he was lost. Said books kept him alive. Jules smiled as she read it. She posted the story, changing all the names, just like she always did. Within hours, comments flooded in. This sounds like him. This reminds me of when he gave my brother his lunch. I once saw him clean up a spill in a diner without saying a word. Every comment added another thread to the same. Tapestry.Keanu wasn't a headline. He was a presence, a stillness in a loud world, but not everyone. Understood, a journalist reached out to Jules. He wanted to write a full article on Keanu, a deep profile, he called it. He asked for details. Quotes. Interviews. Jules declined. This isn't about exposure, she said. It's about reflection. Don't you think the world should know? The journalist asked. They already do, she replied. Just not in the way you want. Meanwhile, Keanu was dealing with something personal, a friend from his early acting days had passed away. No major news outlets mentioned it, but Keanu flew across the country to attend the funeral. He didn't sit in the front, didn't speak. He just stood in the back, head bowed, hands folded. After the service, he found the man's sister. He hugged her. No words. Then he handed her a photo. It was old, wrinkled. Two young men laughing in a crowded subway. He gave me this, Keanu said. Told me to keep it. But it's yours now. She wept in his arms. People often ask Keanu why he stayed so grounded. He never gave the same answer. Twice, sometimes he said, because I remember what it's like to have nothing. Other times he'd say, because people need less advice and more presence. But the answer that stayed with Jules the most came one quiet morning. When they met for tea, she asked him if he ever got tired of being kind. He laughed softly. Kindness doesn't exhaust you. Pretending to be someone else does. Jules's blog had become a small movement. GODs sent in their own stories of quiet acts. A taxi driver who gave a free ride to a woman running from abuse. A teacher who stayed late to help a child whose parents never showed up. A man who fixed broken lights on an old woman's porch for free every winter. And deep in the threads of these stories, people kept whispering his name, not always out loud. Not always with certainty, but the impact was there, like echoes of someone walking gently through the world. On the anniversary of her mother's passing, Jules found another envelope. Again, no return address. Inside was a paper crane, folded. Carefully, delicately. On the wing was a small handwritten note. Grief never ends, but neither does love. Jules didn't cry this time. She just held it close and whispered, thank you, not to a name. Not to a face, but to a feeling. The feeling of being remembered. When the world forgets, Keanu Reeves wasn't trying to be loved. He was just trying not to forget what it means to be human. And the world's so tired of noise. And shadows recognize the light, even if it came one small flame at a time. The kindness that travels in a quiet corner of a train station in Northern California. A boy sat on the floor next to a vending machine. His suitcase was ripped on one side, the zipper barely holding. His eyes were red. His phone battery was dead, and he had nowhere to go. His name was Theo. He had just turned 18. He had left home because it didn't feel like home anymore. The yelling, the silence, the weight of feeling invisible, it was too much. He had planned to reach Los Angeles and figure it out. But his wallet had been stolen while he was asleep during the last leg of his bus ride. Now he had nothing. Just a broken suitcase, a jacket too thin for the cold, and a notebook filled with stories he never showed anyone. People walked past without looking, until someone didn't. A man in a beanie and simple coat stopped in front of him, crouched down slowly and asked, "You okay?" Theo looked up. It was Keanu, not in a movie, not on a screen. Right there, real and kind. "You hungry?" Keanu asked. Theo nodded. Didn't trust his voice to answer. Keanu helped him to his feet, bought him a sandwich and a warm drink, found a bench where they could sit. He didn't ask why Theo was alone. He just listened when Theo began talking, and Theo, who hadn't spoken to anyone in 2 days, started sharing about the fights, about the dreams, about the fear of being forgotten. Keanu never interrupted when Theo finished. Keanu handed him a card. "This place helps kids like you," he said. "I worked with them last year. They won't ask you questions you're not ready to answer, but they'll help you stay warm, fed, safe." Theo looked at the card, then at Keanu. "Why are you doing this?" Keanu leaned back on the bench, eyes watching the sky. "Because someone once helped me when I had nothing," he said. "Dawn, because someone will need you one day too, and you'll remember this moment." That night, Theo walked into the shelter. He stayed for 3 weeks, got help replacing his ID, started attending workshops, even read one of his stories at an open mic night. People clapped, a woman told him afterward. "Your words. They made me feel seen." He smiled, because that was what Keanu made him feel too. Across the country, in a studio office in New York, Jules was preparing to publish her first book. It wasn't a novel, not yet. It was a collection of short stories, real stories gathered from her blog, her life, and the quiet. Beautiful moments people shared when no one else was looking. The publisher wanted to change the title. "You need something flashier," they said. "Something with impact," but Jules insisted. "The Quiet Witness." "You sure?" the editor asked. "Won't grab big attention." "It doesn't need to," she replied. "It just needs to reach the right people." And in the very first pages of the book, she included a simple dedication to the man who reminded me that silence is not emptiness. It's space where kindness speaks louder. She never used his name, but anyone who had ever felt his presence would know. The book was released quietly. No big launch. No loud fanfare, but something unexpected happened. Readers began gifting the book to each other, from nurses to patients, from teachers to students, from strangers on buses to passengers sitting alone inside. They would often write a single sentence. "This made me think of you." One day, a woman named Leela received the book at her desk. She was a receptionist at a large company. Most people never noticed her. She was kind, patient, always smiling, even when tired. But one morning, someone left the book on her desk with a sticky note. "You're the reason I stayed when I wanted to quit. Thank you for being kind when no one else was." She read the note 3 times, then cried in the break room because it was the first time in years someone saw her beyond her name tag. Jules received thousands of emails, but one stood out. It was from Theo. He wrote, "I don't know if you know him, but he helped me once, gave me a chance. And someone told me about your blog. Your stories feel like him. Thank you for sharing. People like that. I want to be like him someday. Maybe I already am, a little," she wrote back. "You already are. And now someone else will be too because of you." Keanu never asked for updates. He didn't track what his actions caused. He kept living the same way. One small choice at a time, helping an elderly woman cross a street, donating without name or request, volunteering at a school under a different name just to teach kids how to build stories with their hearts. He didn't want recognition. He wanted connection. But then, something unexpected happened. A major news outlet got wind of it all. The book. The whispers, they prepared a headline. Is Keanu Reeves secretly changing lives across America? And suddenly, the quiet was at risk. Jules was contacted for comment. Reporters offered money, exposure deals. She refused. "You can write your story," she said, "but leave him out of it." "Why?" the reporter asked. "Because this story isn't about him," she replied. "It's about what he made possible." Keanu heard about the article days before it was published. He called Jules. First time he'd ever done that. His voice was calm, warm. "Thank you," he said, "for protecting what matters." "You were never the story," Jules replied. He chuckled. "I never wanted to be." The article was printed anyway, but it didn't do what they expected. People didn't chase Keanu. They followed the message. Thousands of readers started their own projects, volunteering, sharing stories, sitting with strangers. They called it the Quiet Kindness Challenge. Nothing filmed, nothing posted. Just witnessed. One boy placed free books on park benches with notes that said, "Take one. Pass it on." A nurse began leaving notes in the lockers of staff who looked tired, saying, "You matter today." A young woman left sandwiches under a bridge every night for 3 weeks because she remembered being hungry once. They didn't know each other, but they were connected, not by a person, but by a feeling. The same one Theo felt. The same one carried. It's the same one Keanu passed on wordlessly, and in a small town. Keanu sat on a porch swing beside an old friend. The friend looked at him and asked, "Do you think people see what you're doing?" Keanu smiled, eyes soft. "I don't need them to," he said, "as long as they see each other." When the light circles back, it was a clear spring morning when Jules stepped onto the stage. The auditorium wasn't grand, just a modest hall at a local university where student writers had gathered for a weekend conference. She wasn't a famous author, not yet. But her book, The Quiet Witness, had grown into something more than she expected. It had become a movement, not because of marketing, not because of a bestseller list, but because kindness, when told well, travels like wind touching places you didn't even know existed. Jules stood at the podium, looking at the small sea of faces, young, old, nervous, hopeful. She took a breath. A few years ago, she began, I was an intern who didn't know how to speak up. I thought silence meant weakness. But then someone showed me that silence can also mean strength. When it listens, when it holds space, and when it refuses to turn away. The room leaned in. This person never asked for recognition, never raised his voice. But his presence reminded me that kindness never needs an audience. It only needs to be real. She paused, hands steady. So today, I want to talk to you about how to write not just stories, but truth. Because in a world full of noise, truth is what people remember. After her talk, a student approached her. He was nervous, fumbling, with the sleeve of his sweater. His name was Dev. Your blog saved me, he said, voice cracking. Read one of your posts the night I almost gave up. I don't remember the title, but it was about a man sitting next to someone in silence. It made me feel like maybe someone could sit with me too. Jules didn't speak right away. She simply reached for his hand and said, I'm glad you stayed. Somewhere else, in a quiet village on the outskirts of Vancouver, Keanu Reeves was planting a tree. No press, no cameras. Just him, some gloves, and a small oak sapling. A local community group had invited him once, not expecting a reply. Months later, he showed up, said nothing about being famous, asked for no special treatment. He just grabbed a shovel and worked alongside them, laughing at bad jokes, sharing stories about movies no one remembered, and asking everyone's name like he intended to remember them forever. They asked him once why he came. He wiped sweat from his brow and said, because trees outlive applause. That night, Keanu received a letter in the mail, handwritten. Stamped with care inside was a folded photo. It showed a classroom of third graders holding signs that read, Thank you for our books. The children had been part of a school that received a donation from a foundation Keanu had quietly supported. No branding, no event. Just books, crayons, and new chairs. He held the photo for a long time then. In the quiet of his kitchen, he placed it on the fridge with a magnet that read, You are here. The world kept moving. People kept talking. Louder voices filled screens and headlines, but quietly, gently. Stories kept spreading. The story of Theo, who now volunteered at a shelter in Los Angeles, reading bedtime stories to kids who had nowhere else to go. The story of Ruby, who started a free writing club in her neighborhood and taught teens how to speak with their hearts. The story of Elias, who organized benches across 3 cities, now with hand-painted messages like You are not alone and stay a little longer. And always, always someone would ask, where did this begin? And someone else would whisper there was a man who never asked to be seen, but once you saw him, you couldn't forget. Years passed. Keanu grew older, his hair grayer, his walk slower, but his spirit unchanged one day. He attended a small storytelling event in a town he once visited. He sat in the back, sipping tea, listening to a young woman read a story about a stranger who helped her in a train station when she was 16. After her reading, he approached. Her beautiful story, he said. She blinked, surprised. Thanks, she said. It was true. He nodded. I know. On the day The Quiet Witness hit its 10-year mark, Jules received a message. It was from a publisher. They wanted to release a special edition. One with a foreword. We'd like you to write it, they said. She agreed. Her opening lines read, You will not find his name in this book, but you will feel him in every story.
Guess his kindness didn't need a title.
It just needed a moment. And now, that moment lives in all of us. On a quiet evening, Keanu returned to the studio where Jules once sat, trembling with self-doubt. The lot was nearly empty. But there, by the corner where the metal rig used to stand, someone had placed a plaque. Engraved on it were words he had once whispered to her, "You're doing better than you think. Don't let the noise around you drown out the truth." He stood there a long time, then gently placed a small paper crane beside it, folded just right. And as he walked away, he didn't look back, because kindness doesn't check its reflection. It just moves forward, quiet, certain, eternal. The world may never fully understand why Keanu Reeves is so loved, but for those who've seen him, really seen him, it's not about the movies, the fame, or the mystery. It's about the way he makes people feel real, seen, heard, remembered, because kindness never goes unnoticed, and the ones who carry it never walk alone.